This is the engine of the world. The dollar. The currency whispered in boardrooms, demanded on commodities exchanges, held in the vast, untold reserves of nations and institutions. It's the invisible hand, the universal language of global commerce. But what if this engine sputtered? What if the bedrock upon which the global economy is built wobbled? What if the world woke up one day to find the foundation of its financial system crumbling? Today, we explore the unthinkable. The day the US dollar finally dies. Not in a cataclysmic boom, but in a quiet global chain reaction. A scenario that might just be unfolding piece by painful piece. It didn't happen overnight. The dollar's reign began at Bretton Woods in 1944, a deliberate design by Allied powers. For decades, it was the anchor currency, the go-to for international trade and reserves. Why? Strength, stability, sheer power. Think of the global financial system like a vast, interconnected plumbing network. The dollar is the main water main. Most trade, most finance, most debt is denominated in it. It lubricates the entire system. Trying to replace it isn't just a currency swap. It's like trying to reroute the world's plumbing. For 75 years, it worked. But cracks began to appear. Inflation surged. Geopolitical friction increased. And a powerful, quiet movement gained traction. The idea of diversifying away from the dollar. How does this system function? It's a delicate balance. The US produces goods and services, but borrows heavily to finance its consumption and military spending. The dollar it issues globally creates immense demand. Think of it like this. Every time someone outside the US borrows dollars or holds dollars as reserves, it's like dollars being created out of thin air just to service the US economy. This is why the US can run massive trade deficits. The rest of the world effectively lends it money, buying its debt. For years, the US protected its dollar hegemony by exporting military might and ensuring global acceptance. But this era is ending. The petrodollar, the idea that global oil would be priced only in dollars to prop up demand, lost its luster. The system relies on faith. Faith in US economic strength, faith in the dollar's stability, faith in the US government. This is the core mechanics. The system needs faith. The moment that faith cracks significantly, the plumbing starts to leak. And the consequences are global. The cracks deepen. Persistent inflation in the US erodes confidence. Global powers like China and Russia question the dollar's fairness. They are powerful players, holding vast dollar reserves but increasingly uncomfortable. Enter the BRICS nations, not just as critics, but as potential replacements. They are building a parallel financial infrastructure, a network of their own currencies, potentially backed by commodities or digital assets, aiming to bypass dollar-centric systems. Simultaneously, digital assets surge in prominence. Bitcoin, initially dismissed, becomes a point of discussion among central banks and investors as a potential safe haven or a parallel store of value outside the traditional dollar-dominated system. The turning point isn't necessarily one dramatic day. It's a gradual realization, a slow-motion collapse. The moment when enough countries decide the cost of dollar hegemony, sanctions, financial friction, inflationary pressure, outweighs the benefits. The moment trust begins to fracture irreversibly. The consequences are profound, felt instantly across the globe. Global trade friction, the most visible effect. The petrodollar system breaks. Russia and China can trade oil in rubles and yuan. Global trade invoices can now be in multiple currencies, disrupting established pricing mechanisms and favoring specific regional blocs. U.S. economic strain. Suddenly, the U.S. can't finance its deficits as easily. Global demand for USD drops. U.S. Treasury yields might spike. Inflation could worsen as the dollar weakens. U.S. exports might boom, but imports become shockingly expensive. Financial system instability. The entire architecture built around the dollar, LIBOR, SWIFT, dollar-denominated derivatives, faces disruption. SWIFT alternatives emerge. Replacing decades of financial infrastructure is incredibly complex and risky. Geopolitical shift. The U.S. loses its unique economic leverage. Global power dynamics shift. BRICS nations gain influence. The U.S. dollar's dominance as a tool for foreign policy weakens significantly. For crypto investors, this scenario presents both danger and opportunity. A dollar collapse could validate Bitcoin as digital gold. But the inherent volatility of the transition period is immense. Governments might crack down harder on crypto. For policy watchers, central banks worldwide face a dilemma: how to diversify safely, how to manage the transition. The old rules of reserve management are being rewritten. We've painted a picture of decline, not sudden implosion. But is this the death or the restructuring of the dollar? History shows empires and currencies adapt, not always peacefully. The lesson isn't necessarily doom. It's about the fragility of financial systems built on perceived strength, not inherent might. It's about the power of collective action, a group of nations deciding to build an alternative. It forces a question: is the current system sustainable? Is the dollar's role in the 21st century a given, or a temporary anomaly? Think about it. The world's financial architecture is built on sand. The question isn't if the dollar changes, but how and what next? Let us know your thoughts in the comments. What is your biggest concern about a dollar decline? Will it accelerate, or is it already underway? What should investors prepare for?